have Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, and he writes a story in the Atlantic, an op-ed, and he says this is a couple years ago: why I hope to die at 75. Byline: an argument that society and families and you will be better off if nature takes its course swiftly and promptly. And you go into that article, and sure enough, there's a chart, looks like it could be written by George Bernard Shaw himself, talking about productivity and your contribution to society.
Wow.
Very simple chart for anybody to really see. And by 40, your best contribution years. And from there, it's just downhill, and kind of, we don't need you. And so who is Ezekiel Emanuel, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel? Is he just some guy with this idea? He got lucky, got an op-ed in the Atlantic? Absolutely not. So during the coronavirus, Biden administration comes in. Biden picks him for the coronavirus task force lead. Biden picks for coronavirus task force. Living too long is also a loss. And again, he's a medical ethicist. And you see these words: medical ethics, bioethics. This is kind of a soft version. Some of these ideologies of eugenics you can see wrapped into medical ethics to give it more of a scientific air, and bioethics. These are kind of new words that are using to obfuscate some of these conversations that are really uncomfortable and that have historically dangerous ties to them. And then we go over to the UK. You have the Medical Disabilities Act in 1913. We go back now 2023, 2022, we have, during the COVID pandemic, this was the headline, and we covered this before: fury at do not resuscitate notices given to COVID patients with learning disabilities. And we have whistleblowers coming out, and families as well, whistleblowers and nurses saying, look, they were on their charts. I don't know how they got there. The family said, I never agreed to this. They never agreed to this. So there was an investigation, a bipartisan investigation. MPs wanted answers to this. And the result of that investigation was, during both waves of COVID, they found this. Report finds COVID patients with learning disabilities given blanket DNRs, do not resuscitate orders. So it wasn't just a bad apple here or there. Blanket do not resuscitate orders throughout entire institutions were given, and throughout hospitals were given for people with learning disabilities. And we saw that at some of the nursing homes too, with the older people. And we even have whistleblowers here in the United States when we're talking about this ideology that came forward during COVID. Nurse whistleblower Nicole Sirotek, she came forward and did a popular video at the beginning of the pandemic, and she had this to say.
It is 8:42 New York time, and I got to my regular unit, and they took my patient away, my black guy. And now I'm getting switched units. This is exactly what happened before at the other hospital. As soon as I told somebody, like management, and tried to advocate for my patient, they take the patient away from me, and then they move me. I was trying to advocate for my patient and talk to management here and get the care that he needs because he's being medically mismanaged. And I just had a complete breakdown. I, wasted my time advocating for a patient who's just gonna die anyway. So I legitimately don't even know what to do anymore. Even the advocacy groups don't give a shit about these people. Literally, Black lives don't matter here.
If they're looking for a modern day, very influential eugenicist that connects with modern day philosophy and also of effective altruism, and also connected with things like SBF and what happened with that financial collapse, one of the largest, if not the largest in history. Him too, but look no further than Peter Singer. Peter Singer.
Peter Singer, Brian Singer, Peter Daszak.
Here's a perfect example. This is from Spector, Michael Spector. This is called The Dangerous Philosopher, The New Yorker. This is from September 6, 1999. I'm reading this from Maddie Ben's wonderful article, Shakedowns and Shibboleths. This is quoting Peter Singer. When the death of a disabled infant will lead to the birth of another infant with greater prospects of a happy life, the total amount of happiness will be greater if the disabled infant is killed. Let me make this bigger for everyone. Sorry. The loss of happy life. The loss of happy life for the first infant is outweighed by the gain of a happier life for the second. Therefore, if killing the disabled infant has no adverse effect on others, it would, according to the total view, be right to kill him. This pernicious philosophy is still being popularized. And it's just a rebranding of positivistic and pragmatistic ideas going back to the 18th century onwards. It's just rebranded as effective altruism today. And they add different qualities and colors to it, but it's the same sort of a philosophy of eugenics. And this is bounded within like a social ethical theory that's out of Cambridge. So, or excuse me, Oxford.
Well, it goes along with that
It's out of
test.
Oxford.
You know, when the wife gets pregnant, you take that test and you see if the baby has some sort of Down syndrome or something like that, right? That's to give parents the tough choice of whether or not you're going to keep it, right?
Mhm.
Because according to eugenics, you're supposed to terminate that pregnancy. And so basically by their philosophy, it is literal discrimination against handicapped people.
Yes.
I have a cousin who had a son who had a stroke when he was born, and he's in a wheelchair and he's like quadriplegic, and it's a tough life. Under eugenics, they're saying he doesn't have a right to live, right?
You're right. That the issue is right to live. That's the issue.
Yeah, so I'm a little interested in the people who are expounding, you know, this philosophy. So Chelsea Clinton, right? We've already talked about her mom all night. We're not going to talk about her. I'm sure she's a nice lady, and I'm sure her dad is not Bill Clinton. Okay, so
oh, by the way,
speaking of Rhodes Scholars, Zeke Emanuel, Jeffrey, is a Rhodes Scholar, and you might want to check into why he was running COVID. Right, running cover for COVID.
You also might want to look into who set up the Clinton Global Initiative, who set up Gavi, and who set up the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's one person behind all of them, and his name is Jeffrey Epstein.
It's called Eugenics and Epstein. Yeah, Eugenics and Epstein.
Yep.
Okay, you heard it here first on Grand Theft World. No, I'm just kidding. No, seriously, that's a serious title. Zeke Manuel being a Rhodes Scholar. Zeke Manuel also. His father was an Irgun terrorist who helped to create the state of Israel. So when he's getting put in charge of the American side of this, you got the Rhodes Scholar aspect and you got the Irgun terrorist heritage. So I'm not saying there's anything there. I'm just saying that's relevant information and probably should be weighed on the scale there. This whole idea of eugenics that we've been talking about for the past hour or so. We started out the night looking at Foreign Affairs, the official journal of the Council on Foreign Relations. Do you know what the original title of that journal was?
What, Foreign Affairs?
Yeah. What's the original title of Foreign Affairs? The official magazine of the Council on Foreign Relations. It was the Journal of Race Relations, run by Thorsten Veblen. Right? So between Herbert Spencer, Darwin, this Journal of Race Relations, there's a strong intermingling of the eugenics idea along with the people who funded the Nazis and who are protecting Epstein's client list to this day, right? And it ties into the child abuse as well. So here's a couple more points that I picked up along the way. Pygmalion. Remember when they were talking about Pygmalion in the earlier part? Dell's report.
Mm-hmm.
My Fair Lady, all those sort of things, Pretty Woman are made off that story, right?
Mm-hmm.
The way I was taught in Latin class back in high school was all of those stories go back to Sappho on the island of Lesbos. So I just thought that because it was Pride Month, that should be mentioned. All right. So the other part,
if people are interested in understanding the island of Lesbos and its contribution to history, look up Will Durant's The Life of Greece, second volume of the history of civilization. Very interesting.
Yeah,
it's in the first third of it.
She was a poet.
Sappho. Yeah, Sappho. She was a famous woman poet, which was famous for that too.
They knew what a woman was back then for her to be a poet.
Apparently, they knew what women and men were for thousands and thousands of years. It seemed like our culture got a little confused for some reason.
But they weren't smart enough to know their pronouns back then, so throw it all away. Now, the Gates, Clinton, eugenics, Epstein connection, I think like there's a whole documentary just on that topic right there, because you get into the history of all this sort of stuff. But the other part was, remember how they were saying like they were supporting Hitler and the Rockefeller Foundation was supporting Hitler and Kaiser Wilhelm and all that sort of stuff, right? It occurred to me, because they're like, well, this was 1933 and people knew Hitler was bad. No, Western society was being told Hitler was a great man. He was Times Man of the Year in 1938, I'm pretty sure. Times Man of the Year. And then I thought about that for a second. And I thought, who's given Adolf Hitler good PR in America? Probably those fascists who wanted to take over the government and lead the coup in 1934-35, right? Probably those same people. And then I asked the question, who owned Time magazine to put Hitler on the cover? And my brain said, Henry Luce, Skull and Bones. And then my brain said, the German death cult. I was like, oh, the German death cult, Skull and Bones, supports Hitler. They use the death's head for his SS. Right? So there's some secret society under the brothers under the skin type of stuff going on there, I think. So that was one note. The Luce Hitler Skull and Bones connection. Oliver Wendell Holmes. I have a question about him because he also was known to say, paraphrased, truth and justice are what strong people say it is.
He's a classic ad baculum.
Holmes. Wonder if he's related to John Holmes. All right, Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., Senior. We're looking for Junior, aren't we? Jeez. All right, go back and look for Junior. Here he is. Let's see, what was he all about? Supreme Court Justice, yeah, knew that. Brevet Colonel, first Constitution, early life. Here we go. Boston. Wonder if he's part of the Boston Brahmins families here. The Holmes Senior was an abolitionist. All right, that's cool. Ancestors North American and England. What's that mean? That's Anglo-American, isn't it, Tony? Whoa, during the Puritans. He's old school American.
Yeah, that would have been.
He's British colonist
early
American,
17th century,
right? So you got to be careful of those people who were here when it was still Britain colonies. Transcendentalists, all right, and Harvard College
law, transcendental.
Is
he Boston Brahmin? Because that was
he's Porcellian Club, just like JFK. Hasty Pudding Club. All right. Phi Beta Kappa is an interesting fraternity. It's for the nerds. I have it here. Let me just show you real quick. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the browser and not showing you yet. What kind of production? Give me a heads up. I didn't know I was doing it.
Yeah, my bad.
Getting congested. Watch what. This has been a tough set of clips if you have a heart and you get emotional about stuff like that. I was just looking to see what ominous thing might be in this bio that would lead to that pragmatic view. I also wanted to posit that it's possible that the advanced prodigy type of curriculum that was put upon the shoulders of a young William James Titus, the inspiration for Good Will Hunting, that might also be like an Elon Musk situation, right? What do you think Errol was doing? Do you think he's making forced prodigies back then? Is that part of it? Just, I'm curious because I see these patterns repeating through our society. All right, Oliver Wendell Holmes,
famous sort of commentary on rulings like free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. I'll never forget that, being taught to me when I was 7 years old. And that comes from Schenck versus the United States, 1919.
Pragmatism, right? So
look at this. Abrams versus the United States, 1919, wrote that, quote, the best test of truth is the power of the thought to get itself accepted in the competition, the market, that at any rate, the theory is a theory of a competition, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so he's very famous in regards to legal realist, a moral skeptic. Holmes was a legal realist, as summed up. Oh, sorry, I just put my thing on now. Holmes was a legal realist, as summed up in his maxim, quote, the life of law has not been logic; it has been experience. I don't know how the two are somehow not intertwined, but okay. And a moral skeptic opposed to the doctrine of natural law. Right there. That's all I need to know. So he's basically he'd be a good critical legal theorist today.
Yeah, of course.
He'd be because he pretty much denies, but when you deny natural law, you're basically denying reality.
All right, so he got groomed by Brandeis.
And he's a pragmatist. He's a pragmatist, critical legal studies. Here to have look at this. Okay, here, yeah. His jurisprudence and academic writing influenced much subsequent American legal thinking, including the judicial consensus upholding New Deal regulatory law and the influential American schools of pragmatism, critical legal studies, and law and economics. So he's the progenitor of what the became now, or what is now,
The father of
legal
critical
theory.
theory is a rich white Boston guy.
And to back up real quick, yeah, what a surprise. Back up real quick with the Journal of Race Relations, what Rich was saying earlier. This was actually done by G. Stanley
Race
Hall.
Development. Damn, I always get
Race
that title
Development. The Journal of Race Development is the first American academic journal of international relations. It was founded in 1910 by G. Stanley Hall. Now,
Oh,
G. Stanley Hall is an interesting.
he's in the Skull and Bones book, isn't he? Why do they keep coming up tonight?
And he's one of the fathers of psychology, but also a major educator and helping to design the American school system.
Hey, did you know that Holmes only became Chief Justice of the Supreme Court because William Howard Taft, the Skull and Bones guy, died?
No, that's not. Yeah, that's not surprising necessarily. And he was a Supreme Court justice from when?
And there was another one. Morrison Waite was a Skull and Bones
1902 to 1932.
Chief Justice. He gave corporate personhood a thing. Morrison Waite. Let me see if I can find him real quick. Dun, 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 boom. This guy right here. Corporate personhood under his watch, but I don't think it's really his fault. Clerk misread some stuff, but he's a Skull and Bones dude. So let me find Skull and Bones right here. Waite became a member of Skull and Bones. So the same secret German death cult drug smuggling group. Good thing they don't still exist today and have power.
As a lawyer, let's see, he debated philosophy with his friend William James.
Oh, who was the
at Harvard Law
William
School.
James? The pragmatist William James was the mentor of William James Titus. In fact, William James Titus is named after William James.
Yeah, it's not dissimilar. In fact, it's almost 1-to-1. Same with John Stuart Mill and his father. Like it was an acceleration IQ program and John Stuart Mill ended up having a mental breakdown and sort of separating from, almost like a Ted Kaczynski without becoming, without inciting violence. But, realizing that this sort of hyper-logical scientism, this
is what I'm talking about, since I had mentioned him 10 times tonight. William James Titus was an American child prodigy with exceptional mathematical and linguistic skills. He's notable for his book, The Animate and the Inanimate. It's like we have a time machine here. Didn't we talk about that 7 hours ago? Thermodynamics, the origin of life, boring stuff like that. You shouldn't read it. Ukraine, so he didn't want to be there. So his parents came to America, and they Boris Titus, which sounds like a disease. No, he was actually a fan of William James, and so Boris made William James the godfather and said, give him advanced programming, right? Get the polyglot going, get him 5 languages. Notable child prodigy, cybernetics pioneer Norbert Wiener also attended Harvard and knew Titus, right? So these dudes used to be friends. One of them kind of goes crazy and disappears. The other one makes like cruise missiles. So very interesting interrelationships. And when you see how they treated William Titus and experimented on him, makes you think a little bit about Ted Kaczynski a little bit, Anyway, you guys should check out his book, 1925. And then that was pretty much the high point of his career. He ended up just being like a guy in the office, not doing too much. And then those intelligence agents, kids, took his story and made Good Will Hunting, got an Oscar award from Harvey Weinstein, who definitely didn't have any sexual type of indiscretions that would have been talked about in an episode like this 10 years ago. So that's just a little side history.
Yeah, I just found an article. Yeah, like William Titus and John Stuart Mill were subjected to the exact same intellectual regimen as boys. It was this idea that you could do this. It was sort of I think it comes out of like sort of
forced accelerated learning that denies them childhood, kind of like what they would do to a Michael Jackson type character. Now, wasn't John Stuart Mill accused of being a pederast, or is that just Jeremy Bentham and the other East India Company?
The only difference is Titus didn't suffer a mental breakdown. Well, John Stewart did.
No, his dad incarcerated him. His dad ran a mental institution, and he puts William James Titus in there for a while, which is why he then hates his dad and moves away and doesn't talk to anybody anymore, which is why Matt Damon leaves at the end of the movie.
The same thing that happened to Mill.
Titus he hits a cop, he meets a girl, like all the stuff, all the broad strokes. And this is like a known thing. Like it was like Titus was a myth. You know how they have that movie with honors with Joe Pesci, and he's like the homeless dude in Harvard, and there's like this whole myth, you know, of the guy. Well, that's Titus. Like he's a myth at Harvard, and Damon, who went there for a semester or whatever, he hears this thing, and then they're like, we don't have anything creative, so let's go get the nomination for best original screenplay by taking this guy's story and not even whitewashing it too much. I mean, it's pretty close to what you're looking at, you know. And this guy was a real prodigy who did solve problems on math boards like Matt Damon has always wanted to. Bounded harmonic functions. Ted Kaczynski. There you go.
What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.